Good morning and welcome back to the Dr. Amber Show. So, if you are watching, you are catching me straight off of a trip to visit some friends in Atlanta. I had a wonderful time. First of all, I have not been in Atlanta in several years. I actually can't even remember the last time that I was there in my adult life. But met up with two of my friends, met some other people, and really just had a very good time. So I enjoyed myself. I am happy to be back. It's the summertime, so I've got a lot of travel coming up. I've got a trip with my family to the beach this week, and I'm also going to New York to wrap up some things with the Goldman Sachs program, Black in Business. If you've heard, if you're an entrepreneur, highly recommend you apply. It was a wonderful experience for me, but wrapping up some things, gonna meet a friend there. Summer is summering. But let me tell you what happened to me on the way back from my trip to Atlanta. On the way back, I was boarding my plane, getting back home. And, you know, when you're on the flight, there are so many different people. There are so many different energies and moods people have. You're literally in the midst of the public when you are traveling. And when I'm in public like that, I tend to be someone who is a lot more reserved. I'm pretty quiet. I'm kind of just fading to the back and trying to just get home. I'm not having a lot of conversations with anyone, especially if I don't know you. I'm just there. I do a lot of watching. I do a lot of observing though. And I observed this thing happen. And I actually have not experienced this often, but I see this discourse happening often on the internet about what is appropriate when it comes to small children flying with their families. And so I had this encounter where on my flight, there was a family of 5. There was a mom, there was a dad, and there were 3 young girls. The girls were the youngest looked to be maybe 18 to 20 months. The middle looked to be maybe 3. And then the oldest was probably 4. Now I really want to know their ages because I'm trying to think if I'm guessing these ages right. But that's what I suspect were their ages. And these little girls, you knew they were on the flight. I'll just say it like that. You knew they were on the flight. They were not quiet. It was clear that they were on the flight the entire time. As you know, that ruffles feathers. And I'll be honest with you. Actually, you know what? Let me stay focused because I have some notes here because what I want to talk to you about is what happens when kids are on flights and all of the expectations that other people have about that experience, about kids' behaviors, but then even how they view men and women differently in terms of parenting expectations. I was thinking about that the entire time, and I want to talk that through with you because if you've experienced this too, I'm just really curious about what your experience was. So let me just explain a little bit more about what I noticed with these kids. I'm going to tell you what I noticed about the kids. I'm going to tell you what I noticed about the parents. I'm going to then also tell you what I noticed about the passengers and the people around us on this plane. And then I'm going to tell you exactly what I noticed within myself during this time and what it felt like for me. And then we're going to kind of talk about the responsibilities here, just in terms of the parents, the passengers, yourself, so that hopefully this experience for you, if you run into this next time, you'll get through it. You'll get through it. So let's talk about this. Okay, so the kids, again, these little girls, you knew they was on a plane, okay? The very first thing that I noticed, and I think that most of the passengers noticed, is that these girls were loud. I don't know if they knew what an inside voice was. These babies were loud, like voice raised. They were very much using their outside voice. Very adorable though, like so sweet, little, but the outside voices were on inside the plane. Ooh, something else I should add. Our flight was delayed by an hour. And they had just asked for 20 volunteers to give up their flight because they overbooked the flight. So tensions were high. However, those of us that were on the plane, we had made it. We were able to get on, but we were an hour behind. So again, not everyone was in the best mood, but these babies were loud. Not only were they very loud, they were, I'm just going to say they were demanding snacks. Both of them, all of them, except for the little baby, because the little baby I don't think could talk. At some point we're saying, we want M&Ms, we want M&Ms, we want M&Ms, daddy M&Ms, daddy M&Ms. And I'm thinking, daddy, you gonna give them some M&Ms? Are you gonna tell them to quiet it? I don't know, because guess what? Everyone parents differently. So they were demanding snacks, demanding M&Ms. Mommy, chocolate, I want a snack. I want a snack. Again, adorable. Cuties, adorable. I also noticed at some point, because the oldest two were sitting with dad, and then mom was across the aisle with the little one. And I noticed the two girls popping up and peering their head backs and looking at the passengers behind them. And I know y'all don't like that. I know a lot of y'all don't like that. I see a lot of the discourse online of why this kid's staring at me, what they looking at me for. Just a lot of, yes, that. And I saw all this because I was literally 2 rows behind them. I'm so glad I got to see this because we get to analyze this today. The girls. But you know what else I noticed about them? They were free. They did not seem afraid of nobody or nothing. They didn't give a fuck about what anyone on that plane thought of them. They did not seem scared or hesitant. They were just being. And I love when kids are able to just be. That's exactly what they were able to do on that flight. All right, so let's talk about the parents. This is what I noticed about the parents. Couple, mom, dad, look to be maybe early 30s. What I noticed about the parents' parenting style is that they were so loving. They were so compassionate. They were so patient. Not one point did I notice these parents lose their patience at all, which is so rare for parents, especially who are traveling with 3 young children. As you know, when you travel with kids, you got to bring a lot of stuff. You got to keep up with a lot of things. 3 young children traveling, and our flight was an hour delayed. They were so patient. Again, patient, loving, warm, grounded. Even when we found out that there was going to be a delay, I saw mom call someone and say, hey, go back to sleep. We're delayed. And then she and her spouse just giggled about it. They just laughed. It's like, no big deal. We're good. I really admired that about them. I admired their ability to just stay grounded, stay focused, still find the joy, still find whatever they needed to be in this moment and be kind, precious, loving, sweet, and patient with their kids. I also noticed that they didn't really seem to be influenced by the tensions or anything with regard to the passengers around them. And mind you, we'll get to the passengers next. We'll talk about the passengers, but that was the biggest thing that I noticed about them. Their temperament was so loving, which to me makes a lot of sense in terms of why these girls were able to be so free and so the girls were able to just literally be their full, happy-go-lucky, wild selves. And I could see why based on how their parents showed up in the airport yesterday. Let's talk about these passengers, okay? Girl, oh my God. Again, as you can tell, because I'm giving you a lot of details, I like to notice. I like to watch. That is my superpower. And I watched everything. The passengers. I want to tell you so bad what I was feeling, but I'm going to stay focused because what I felt within myself is what really led me to start being very vigilant of what the passengers and the people around us were doing and what they likely were expecting. I often notice that when there is a family with small children, there tends to be a lot of eyes. There tends to be a lot of eyes on that family. And this might be you. This may have been your experience at some point. If you're traveling or in the airport, you have your babies and, your family is there. There's a lot of onlookers. There's a lot of observers watching you. And for some people, that can feel really uncomfortable. That could lead to more judgment, more criticism, more critique, more expectation. I work with a lot of clients who really struggle with parenting in public because of the onlooking eye and the gaze of other people, and then how that changes or modifies their own expectations of how they should show up in the moment. I have a lot of parents I work with who really struggle with that, and what ends up happening to them is that they start to become this other version of themselves that actually does not align with who they want to be as a parent. So for instance, maybe they do want to be more warm, more compassionate, but when they're in the public and there's this onlooking of these observers around them, they find themselves maybe becoming very strict or leaning into control a little bit more. So I'm saying all this to say parenting in public is very difficult because of this gaze that is all around you that you also cannot control. There were a lot of onlookers, a lot of people just like looking, some people just in admiration of like, oh my God, how cute these girls are. There were a lot of looks, a lot of stares, a lot of watching. Once we got onto the plane is when I really started to notice the interactions between the people in this family increase a bit. The first thing I noticed as soon as we said we hadn't even taken off yet, and the girls were, again, loud and bold and free. There, and you knew it. There was an older woman in front of them who popped her head up and looked back at the girls. The look was giving, why the hell they so loud? She didn't say this, but the look was very much giving, why the hell they so loud? So I saw that and I was like, okay. I saw the look. I'm sure the mama saw the look. I'm sure daddy saw the look, but still the parents were so focused on their kids. But that lady gave that look. I noticed that. I then noticed other passengers around them peering their head into the aisle to kind of just see, like, what is all the commotion? These girls. I think the peak of the interactions happened with a woman right in front of me, in the row in front of me, and then in front of her were the girls, and then across the aisle from her was mom. This woman seemed to be frustrated. and irritable. And she turned to mom and said, hold on, I wrote down the quote. Let me look. I don't want to get this wrong. Okay. She turned to mom and she said, will you tell them to stop screaming? When I heard that, I was like, woo. She said, will you tell them to stop screaming? Mom's response, again, mom had a very calm demeanor. Mom's response was, she looked at her, she said, do you think that would help? And then the woman replied, I quoted her, hold on. She said, yes, you are the mother. You are in charge. I wanted to melt in my seat, honey. As you can tell, I don't like that conflict. That felt uncomfortable for me. But again, we're not talking about my responses yet. We still with the people. She said, you are the mother. You are in charge. So the mom just looked at her. I could tell mom was at that point feeling pressure of external expectations. Mom felt judged, mom felt criticized, and she might have also felt embarrassed. But she turned back around and she moved on. She moved on. And that was the end of that. We then went on with our flight. The girls continued to be themselves. There were some points where I heard dad saying shh, kind of shushing them a bit, but the family continued to be themselves. And luckily, we all landed safely. We got to our destination and everyone moved the fuck on. But let me tell you how I was reacting. I wanted to melt. I wanted to go. I wanted to hide. I wanted to run because the tension was just so palpable. You could feel it in the air. So I also took some notes on what I was feeling because I want us to talk about it a little bit. And then I want to go into what we should be expecting from these experiences and what responsibility belongs to who in these situations. So what I noticed about myself or within myself, the very first thing I noticed how loud the girls were. And I am someone who is, I want kids to be free to be themselves. I'm not someone who believes that kids should be overly controlled. They need to be free. They need to be themselves. They are children. They are children. However, I found myself wondering when and how the parents would intervene. I don't believe that kids should be controlled, but I do believe that kids need boundaries. Kids need structure. Kids need a foundation. Kids need a guide. Kids need to be taught what behaviors are most appropriate in given settings. And that is not only modeled by the parent, but it's also taught and established through early and often expectation setting. So I found myself wondering I wonder when are these parents going to place some boundaries around how the babies are showing up in the airplane. So I found myself wondering that and just kind of noticing and unfortunately I didn't really see it. Again, these parents were so great with compassion, warmth, love, but I believe that they maybe lacked some of the skill that they needed for the other part of what makes parents really strong is also this high level of expectation, standards, boundaries, structure, limits. I also noticed myself having a lot of compassion for these parents. I have traveled with my kids, my two kids on a flight, and it is not easy. It is not easy. If you are a parent and you have children and you travel with them in flight, you know this is not easy. And sometimes it's not fun. So I had a lot of compassion for them in this moment because I could imagine how difficult this might be, how tired they might be, even though they did a good job of showing up and still bringing the joy, bringing the peace, bringing the calm. But traveling with children is not easy, and especially when you are being criticized and judged by the people around you. This just came to me, and it's not even in my notes because as soon as I said this is what just came to my mind. I noticed the majority of the passengers around us either being judgmental and critical or very neutral. I did not observe anybody offer to help. And I'm just sitting with that because I don't like the way that feels in me when I make that realization. I did not notice anyone say, here's some coloring packets for the girls, or simply engage. When the babies were turning their head and kept staring at the people, nobody said, "Hi, what's your name?" No one smiled. So it leads me to, I guess, my next point of how weary I noticed that the passengers were and intolerant of children. I have started to notice that more and more and more, and it really disturbs me. I don't like the way it makes me feel, just this sense of this lack of tolerance that there seems to be in our public spaces now for children and families with small children. More than ever, and I don't know if this is geographical because you all know I'm in DC, so more than ever I start to notice these adult-only spaces, no children here. And so then it's like, well, is it because we don't like children? Why, when and how have we become so intolerant of allowing children to be a part of our communities, a part of our spaces? And then with that, why the hell are we so critical and judgmental of parents? What has happened to our ability to mind our own goddamn business? What is happening? What has happened to our ability to help support children and families in our public spaces? Nobody offered support. Nobody was positive. Everyone was neutral or negative, including, and I'll admit, I'm in that because I was observing. So I was neutral. I was very neutral. No one went into the other side to be positive, to offer support, to offer a smile. That bothers me. Two more things that I noticed about the passengers around us. People really struggle to manage their own emotions. And this is why, hold on, quick plug. I know I wrote a book for parents, but adults could use this as well because it generally helps you to learn how to regulate your own emotions. If you're a parent, even better because it teaches you to do this so that you are able to support your child in the process. But adults really struggle to regulate their own emotions. And many of them in public really cannot because, so for instance, let's take the woman who asked the mother to tell the children to stop screaming. And let's think through what she was likely feeling in that moment. She was likely feeling, the woman, frustrated, irritated, annoyed, angry, all these things that did not feel good in her body. She likely was, I don't know. But then when I think about her choice, the decision to engage with mom and tell her how to parent her kids, I'm not sure if that was the right choice. And again, everyone has an opinion, so I'm so curious what you all think. Please put that in the comments. But I'm wondering if her decision to ask mom to parent differently in this moment was actually just her inability to regulate her feelings of frustration, anger, irritation, annoyance. Because, baby, it's okay to be frustrated. I tell my kids that all the time. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be annoyed. It's okay to be angry. But that doesn't necessarily mean we then get to start controlling and manipulating the people around us, especially in a public space. I don't know. Also, even the woman that was in front of the girls who, as soon as we got on, she looked back at them like, remember the look that was giving, why the hell these kids so loud? Her look was very angry, frustrated, irritated. And I'm wondering if that also could have been held if she simply was just able to regulate her own emotions in the moment. Because guess what? If you look at my children like that, baby, we might end up having some words. Because if I ever catch anybody look like that at my kids, I don't give a... hold on. I don't care what they're doing. Don't look at my children like that. I don't like that. I didn't like that. So what if she was just able to... what if she was better able to regulate her feelings of frustration in that moment? I don't know. People really struggle with emotion regulation. It's because emotions are intense. Emotions feel complicated. And sometimes we forget that other people are not responsible for our emotions or for how we regulate our emotions. I'm sure everybody on that flight was irritated, frustrated, angry. That doesn't necessarily mean we then get to try to start manipulating and controlling how these parents parent. Did they lack some skills? Absolutely. Absolutely. I would have loved to see them implement some boundaries. I would have loved to see mom or dad introduce the inside voice, have a conversation about what to expect on the plane, have a conversation about what other people are likely feeling around them. I would have loved to see them be more firm. I would have loved to see them set higher expectations for their girls. I would love to work with these parents around how to shift their own expectations within themselves of what the girls are capable of so that they can show up in the plane more appropriate. And even with all of that, we don't get to control and manipulate how other people parent just because it's making us uncomfortable in a public space. We just don't. When we're able to regulate our emotions, it allows us to mind our own business. This just came to me, maybe the people who don't know how to mind their own business, they just struggle with emotion regulation. So go ahead and slide them this. Because truly, if you are able to regulate your own emotions, it allows you to stay in your own bubble. And you can still have your feelings. You can still be upset. You can still be irritated, frustrated, but it allows you to stay in your bubble and say, hey, I don't like what's going on over there, but it's none of my business. Last thing, this one is a big one too. I noticed that the expectations for mom seem to be different than dad. And I only got one snippet of this, one example of this, but I think we can safely extrapolate and generalize here. That woman who asked mom to tell the children to stop screaming, she didn't address mom and dad. She didn't turn to include both of them. This was a conversation and some beef she had with mom. And she told her it will help because you are the mother. It was almost as if this was mom's fault. Mom was to blame. As if there was no other parent present. And so, of course, it leads us to talk about, and maybe this could be a whole different episode, just how differently we view mothers and fathers, especially in these public spaces. And the expectations tend to be heavier and higher for mothers and women than they are for men and fathers. And that's not fair. Y'all, I gotta go wake up my kids. I'm recording very early in the morning. So a few more points, and then I just want to hear from y'all. Leave your comments so that I can come back to and we can talk about this more. So my last points I want to make is, what's the responsibility of the people? Okay, when you are flying, when you are traveling, you are in public. There's going to be a lot of people. There's going to be a lot of things happening. So whose responsibility is what? Let's break it down. So I have here, what's the responsibility of the parent? And you probably already heard me talk through what I would have liked to see differently with this set of parents. And again, their strengths, very high levels of compassion, empathy, love, warmth, patience, grounding. They were excellent at that. However, I do think there is a responsibility for this couple and these parents to increase their level of expectation, standard, structure, boundaries, limits, guidance for the girls. That would allow the girls to be able to enter several different public spaces and manage their behaviors differently, because they, over time, are teaching and practicing how we shift our voices to an inside voice, or how we stay seated in the plane, how we not stare at other people. Kids are kids. We cannot control kids. However, it is our responsibility to be the guide and the teacher so that kids are able to enter certain spaces with different tools, different set of standards about how to behave and how to show up. And so I do think that is a responsibility of those parents, and I would love to see them work on that so that they can do that differently for the next time they have a flight. Maybe in another episode, we'll talk a bit about permissive parenting, because what I observed veered into the realm of permissive parenting, and permissive parenting is very high compassion, high levels of compassion, low levels of expectation. That is often a parenting style many people fall into when they either simply just don't have the tools, the knowledge, the skills to implement the appropriate amounts of structure, limits, systems, boundaries, and or something I'm noticing even more in the parents that I work with and see is that they slide into this permissive parenting style because they are afraid. They are afraid of repeating toxic parenting styles that maybe they grew up with. They are afraid of damaging their relationship and their repair with their kids because they're afraid that if they're too harsh, too strict, too controlling, that it could ruin everything. They are essentially paralyzed with fear of, if I get it wrong, I'm going to mess this up. So I'm going to just pour love and warmth and compassion and empathy. And that is not bad. But that alone is always going to set you up to be raising a child who is fragile, who is not resilient emotionally, and who doesn't know how to enter these spaces with the appropriate set of skills to manage their own behaviors. I want to see, and I like to see parents get to the point where they are high compassion, high love, high nurturance, high warmth, and high structure, high boundaries, high limits, high expectations. And that is exactly what I do when I support parents. More recently, we have a program coming up for parents, 8-week program in September called Becoming the Parent You Needed. If you're interested in that, go to my website. I'll include the link in the description for how to ensure that you haven't slid into this permissive parenting style, and how we get you to the point where you are upping your levels of limits, boundaries, systems, structure, expectation, and beating that fear that you feel. Because I know a lot of you feel that fear of, if I get this wrong, it'll ruin everything. If I parent how my parents parented me, I won't have a relationship with my kid. I don't want to damage their mental health. And that is also valuable. Those are my values too, as a parent and as a professional who helps parents. But we got to get you to the point where you have a better balance. That's what I would love to do with these parents that I saw in the airport, but I probably will never see them again, huh? A few more points. So yeah, the expectation of the parents is really to prepare children for how to enter these public spaces through teaching and guidance and modeling. And so we need to be doing that. What's the responsibility of the passengers around us? To mind their own fucking business and to learn how to regulate your own emotions, because when you enter a public space, you don't get to have authority over how other people parent. You just don't. And I know it's frustrating to watch. I know it's irritating, but you don't get to say that mommy needs to tell the girls to stop screaming. You just don't. That is my opinion. In those public spaces, it is your responsibility as a passenger to mind your fucking business, regulate your emotions, and guess what? If you want to be more supportive, offer some assistance. Do you got a coloring book in your bag? Can you give it? Do you have a book that you think the girls might like? Can you offer some words of encouragement? Because criticism, judgment, demands, places more pressure on the family, and they definitely not going to receive what you say. So that is the responsibility of people on the plane. Hey, I get it. It is very irritating when you just want to get on the plane and have a little nap, but kids are screaming. Kids are kids, and you need to regulate your own emotions because you're in public. If you don't like it, go get on a private jet. And guess what? Most of us can't do that. So hey, be a villager. You got to experience the inconveniences of being in the village. Y'all, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know in the comments what you think. If you're interested in my upcoming program, Becoming the Parent You Needed, please check out the description. I have more information about that program. I would love to help you become more authoritative in your parenting style and not be beholden to your fears of being too strict or being too hard or being too harsh. We can get you to the right balance, and I would love to support you in that. Okay, I'll see you on the next episode.